welcome everyone to the Town of Norfolk Planning Board meeting for Tuesday, the 21st, 2025. This meeting is a Zoom only meeting. We are virtual for the whole meeting. So that means that the link was sent out previously and it's not being live streamed tonight. There's some technical difficulties. We're just going to record the Zoom and submit it over, and it will be on the town's YouTube channel for future enjoyment and documentation purposes. So let's go ahead and get started with some introductions. So we have, if you could just say here, we'll do a kind of a quick roll call. So for planning board members, I'm just going to go with what I see in order. So Gary Sullivan.
Here.
Chris Montfort.
Here.
Melissa Mayo.
Here.
And then Gary Searle.
Here.
Awesome. So that's, and then myself, Chad Peck. So that's our planning board members. We do have our town planner, Rich McCarthy, on, as well as our admin assistant, Betsy Visual. So let's go ahead and get started with our first public hearing, which is 262 Dedham Street site plan. So I want to reopen the public hearing for 262 Dedham Street site plan, stormwater management permit, and special permits for the proposed renovation of the existing building and construction of a 13,500 square foot addition consisting of a commercial shooting range, gun shop, membership lounge, and training facility with associated parking, utility connections, and stormwater management system. All right, so public hearing is opened. So we do have, I believe, I see Rich on there.
Yes.
Who's the engineer for that project?
Correct.
If you want to go ahead and I guess open up with where we're at and what the pending items were from our previous meeting.
Okay, I'll share the screen with the site plan. We had basically discussed all the technical issues on the site plan, and we had continued the meeting for your staff to draft up a decision for each of the permit, the special permit and the stormwater permit. And I believe one of the other outstanding items was just to try to get some feedback from the fire department on the site plan as it was laid out. And I believe Rich McCarthy, correct me if I'm wrong, you did receive email back from the fire chief on this one saying that he was good,
satisfied as proposed.
Yes. So I think at this point we were basically looking for the board to review the decision and issue the approvals if you see fit.
Okay. Board members, did we have any other final comments? I mean, we're in a public hearing, so any other final comments on this, and I'm going to open it up after the board to anybody on the call as well. But let's first start with the board. I mean, it looks like they added the extra landscaping for that parking lot towards I guess it'd be towards the
northwest corner.
The northwest part.
Yep. Along Shire.
Yep.
I think I'm good. I think that absolves my questions that I had originally.
Yep. And I remember at the last meeting we talked about the light pole height, and so that's been resolved. So that was good. Okay. I don't see any other questions from the board. I'm going to open it up to anybody else on the call if they had any questions. There's a few others. Okay, I don't see any hands raised.
No, Betsy Whitney was going to attend tonight and had some comments, but I think there were favorable comments, but I don't see her on the call tonight.
Okay. All right. Did she email? I I didn't, did she email those to us? That,
No, she didn't. She just
Okay.
emailed me this morning
all right,
asking about the meeting, so
okay. All
I
right,
know that she is in support of the project.
okay. Well, Peter Diamond, I see he's got a question. Go ahead,
Thank you.
Peter.
Through the chair, Peter Diamond. And I was wondering if they incorporated any vehicle charging stations in the parking areas. It's quite hard to see the layout online.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yes, we do have that incorporated into the design that would show up on the electrical drawings. They would be in the front parking area. We don't have them specified on the plan, but we did discuss that at previous meetings, and that those will be incorporated into the design.
Okay, I do remember that. Did we lose Peter? No, he's still there. Yep.
I didn't know if Rich McCarthy, if that's required during this planning stage to have that shown on the parking plan.
So it's an interesting, yeah. You don't show it on the site layout plan.
No, I mean, we can add those on the MyLaws, but like we had discussed them previously, and then they have planned for them.
What level they're, do you know, so what's the, so I'm gonna go roundabout and answer your question, Peter, I think, right? So these are 1 and 2 is what's required per the code? Yeah,
I'd have to, the new building code came out, so I'd have to check with Bob and Lou. I think level 2 may be required at a minimum, and if they substitute the level 2, there would be level 1 at a quantity of 3 or 4 to the level 2. But I thought it
Okay.
might be important to
Yeah.
have the parking spaces designated on the plan that he submits. That was my question.
Dexter Preston from Daycons Online. I know we had talked about this previously as well. Anything you could add to that, Dexter?
Yes. So we'll be obviously needing to follow the code restrictions to make sure we have the adequate number of provided spaces that are going to be EV charger. The locations of those charging stations are really going to be driven by what is optimal for the existing conditions of the building to be able to supply them from the rerouted electrical room. That's really kind of a budget decision that we're making once we get into the construction aspects of it, whether they are in the rear lot or in the front lot and which spaces they provide. But we will provide the number of spaces required by code.
okay. So in terms of it's a little, the code, our zoning bylaws is behind in terms of EV charging stations, because
Yep.
technically they're not allowed in this zone yet. It's on the agenda for discussion, for which then would be going before town meeting in May.
We're following the stretch code, which does have requirements under C40. Oh, I forget the spec number, code number, but the stretch energy code requires them to be put in place and not operable, but requires all of the infrastructure to be ready for the pedestals to be installed.
Okay.
I believe it's C403 or C405. I can't remember which.
You're talking about the energy code, C4 whatever.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, Rich, I think he's correct in 225 CMR 23 was the stretch code for commercial, I believe. And we would just have to check at the building department on the number of EV charging spaces that are required for this facility. Through the stretch code.
Yeah, the quantity based on the new parking provided, and I believe, Rich, we did that as 3 was the minimum.
Yeah, I think that's where we were going towards. I mean, I think if we could put a condition in the decision that EV parking spaces shall be provided per all applicable codes or something.
For new
Yeah, I
parking.
think that's
Yep,
a wise,
And we should be able to, by the time I produce the MyLaws with the decisions and everything, we should be able to specify them on the MyLaws.
okay. I think that solves it in my mind. We
Yep.
can take care of it.
okay. Peter, any other questions?
Well, thank you.
Okay. Anyone else? Okay. Well, hearing no questions, I think we should close the public hearing. So I'd like to entertain a motion, and this is going to have to be a roll call vote with cameras on because we are remote. So I'd like to entertain a motion to close the public hearing for 262 Dedham Street.
So moved.
All right, so we have it moved. Do I have a second?
Second.
All right, moved and seconded. So we'll do a roll call vote again. I'm just kind of going down the list that I see on my screen. So Gary Sullivan,
Aye.
Melissa Mayo,
Aye.
Chris Montfort,
Aye.
and the chair votes aye. Gary Searle, what's your
I
opinion?
would vote aye if I were voting.
Love it. Love it. Awesome. All right, so we have our public hearing closed. We now need to vote on the draft decisions. We have two draft decisions, right, Rich? We have a site plan and special permit, and then we have the stormwater management permit. Is that right?
Correct.
Yep.
Yep.
So do you have a preference on which one we do first?
Yeah, site plan, special permit.
Sure. All right. So we do have a draft decision. It's in that Google Drive folder for both of them are in there. We have just scrolling down to see where
Look and see what number.
Yeah, we need to make one edit to the decision. Rich, had noticed that it references the demolition of the existing building, which we know is not gonna happen, so that was carryover from the prior site
Yep.
plan decision, so
Yep, we'll need to take that out. Plus we have to add in that language about the EV charging that we
Mhm.
just discussed. I'm just looking at the waivers that they had. That seems, that looks right. I think that's it. Anybody else on the board see any changes to the draft decision for the site plan and special permit? Okay, well then I would like to entertain a motion to approve the site
Oh.
plan and special.
Sorry, I was
Yeah.
trying to get back to Zoom.
Go ahead.
There was a mention in there about the master plan of 2007, didn't we? I think we said previously we were going to update that. Am I thinking of the right one? Let me go back to the
So
document.
that's technically, honestly, it's still 1992 in the bylaw.
I don't know that.
Right,
So
So
that
just-
is on for tonight's zoning bylaw, this amendment discussion.
right,
okay. So just be consistent. We want to be consistent with what it is currently then.
yeah.
Which is 92.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Good question though, Melissa. It's wrong. It's outdated. We need to update it because we need to get recognized for all the effort we put in to get that done in 2024. So
And it's such a good one.
yeah. All right, I'd like to entertain a motion for the site plan and special permit application decision number 2024-10 for the 262 Dedham Street with two, as printed, but with two revisions, and that is, or those are the addition of the EV language for making sure that's designated for EVs as per codes, for all codes, and then the other, Betsy, was the removing the demolition because they are not going to be tearing down that building.
That's correct.
Can I get that moved?
So moved.
Right.
Oh,
Do I have a second?
Who'd you have for your first? Okay.
I don't know. Who do we get for the first?
give it to
Betsy.
Chris. I'll second it.
All right. Chris moved it. Gary seconded. We'll do a roll call vote. Gary Sullivan,
Aye.
Chris Montfort,
Aye.
Melissa Mayo,
Aye.
and Gary Searle, your opinion?
Yes.
Thumbs up. Nice. All right. That has been, oh, and then I'm sorry, Chad Peck. Yes, sorry. The stormwater management permit. So we have a draft decision on that. Did anybody see any site plan? Yeah. There's no waivers.
No.
I do not see any changes to what's been drafted.
Yeah, that should be pretty straightforward, that one.
Any questions on that? Any discussion? See none. I'd like to entertain a motion to approve the stormwater management permit for 262 Dedham Street as printed.
Moved.
So we got that moved. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, it's been seconded. We'll do a roll call vote. Gary Sullivan,
Aye.
Chris Montfort,
Aye.
Melissa Mayo,
Aye.
and myself, Chad Peck, votes aye. And Gary Searle, what's your opinion? Awesome. So we now have that done. So
Great.
Rich and Crowley, good luck. Wish
Thank
you
you
well
so
on the
much.
project. And we'll look forward to seeing the Mylars for our signature on that when you get them ready.
Yep.
Thanks, everyone. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Have a good night, all.
Yep.
Good
Thank
night.
you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Night.
I'll have those printed out and ready for you.
Thank you. Have a good night. Appreciate it.
Yep. Thank you, Dexter. All right, Betsy, so you'll have those ready for us, what, like tomorrow?
Yeah,
Thursday?
we're meeting Monday night. in
Oh, that's right,
person,
we're meeting
so
Monday.
why don't we I'll just
Yep.
have them ready for you to sign then.
Let's do it then. Yep,
Perfect.
perfect. Sounds good. So it is 7:20. So it's past 7:15. We got our next public hearing. So I'd like to reopen the continued public hearing for 17 Pine Street, which is a request for a site plan modification to allow a childcare, construct an outdoor play area, and install a drop-off and pickup signage. This was continued from our December 10th meeting.
All right. So, Betsy, I think you need to allow me to screen share. Let's see.
Should be good.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so similar to the previous public hearing that we were waiting on comments from the fire department.
Yep.
They did not have any comments in terms of it was acceptable as is. From the last meeting, the plans have been updated to show the material in terms of which is a pervious material inside the fenced in play area, which is located in that green shaded area, as well as the I'll just scroll over to this way, which is the drop-off pickup only signs that are going to be installed in the parking lot. Well, not actually inside the parking lot, into the grass area in front of the parking lot with the details shown here. They have a signature block for the planning board's signature. We prepared a decision to approve as is. And if I zoom in a little more, you can see the where the drop. Oops, sorry, hold on a second. Where the drop-off parking spaces are to be designated. This is where the gate is into the fenced-in play area. I can go in, and I did get pictures if you wanted to see that this parking is protected with an existing upright curb. You know, it was one of the questions that the board
Yep,
had.
that was, yep. And so you're talking about putting a sign, though, that signage, that drop-off signage, there'll be 7 signs, one at each parking spot. Is that the intent?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
yep.
And I lost my train of thought there. Sorry.
Well, you were gonna,
Oh yeah, there is the
curb.
curbing, and then there's the. I'm going to stop sharing for a moment. There is lighting in the parking lot as well, so there is existing lighting within the parking lot for people to walk. Let me look and see if I have the. I can just bear with me. I'll get the memo.
Rich, I don't know if I can share my screen. I do have some photos on my screen as well. Sorry, that's Molly.
Sure, if you want. That might be faster than me.
It's just in a Word document, but it should work.
Molly, I should have done this on the last public hearing. Can you just introduce yourself and then go?
Sure. Sorry, I'm Molly Banis. I think I give my address too. I'm 40 Foxwood Cove in Holliston. Is that still a thing?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. And I am planning on opening Lovebug Daycare.
Oh, great.
So let me see if I can share. I don't know how to do this. Hold on. Share. Select a window that you want to share. Share.
You got it.
All right. Did that work?
It did.
Got it.
All right. Awesome. So yeah, so there's the curb. And then you can also see, I can probably zoom in a little bit. There's some lighting as well, right here. And there's another one right over here. Yeah, I don't know if that suffices or.
It's so the area that's going to be fenced in for the playground does it also include some of those lower shrubs that need to get removed?
It does. So we actually met with conservation the day after we met with you last time, and they did approve the area. It's just previously landscaped shrubs and trees, so they didn't really have an issue with it. And they approved the spacing as well in terms of the 30 by, whatever it was.
Okay.
Are there requirements for when we use or ask someone to incorporate bollards, or is that a personal choice? So is there a requirement in certain conditions to use them?
We don't necessarily have a specific standard or set of when they should be used.
Yeah, so Dunkin' Donuts might choose to just protect their facility and put a few in the front, but that's their choice.
Yes.
Okay.
What we do have is the curb in there, and then
Yep.
may also add wheel stops, as well.
Yeah, I did look into wheel stops, and if you felt more comfortable with those lining it would be easy to do.
I was only asking the question.
Yeah. No, that's a good question, Gary. I mean, what does anyone else on the board have any other comments about that? I mean, obviously these are children and safety and you're parking cars, so.
And I'll just chime in. There isn't a code requirement to install bollards, but this plan will be reviewed by the licensing department for the daycare, so they may or may not suggest that we add those. And it's really at the discretion of the owner to see whether or not it's a safe environment and make that call in the
Okay.
licensing department.
Yep. Any other comments from the board?
So we could, on the topic of the wheel stops, curb stops. We could draft a decision where if it's required, if the department, the state Department of Children, what is it?
EEC.
EEC
Mhm.
required it, we could have it as a condition so that you don't have to modify the plan to put them in. So it can just be put in.
Maybe modify it to say any other parking safety
Yeah.
mechanisms.
Sure.
That way
And then
it's a
they-
little bit more open-ended to say any
Sure.
other parking safety mechanisms could be allowed per direction of the, what'd you say, DEC?
EEC.
I'm sorry, EEC. Yeah. Okay.
And then they would just be picked up on the as-built plan that would
Yep.
that would
Okay.
be done on the other end of it.
I like that. Any comments from anyone else on the call? I'm gonna open it up to everybody. I do not see any hands. Anything else, Rich, on, so we got the parking lot, the signs, got the pictures there. We heard from police and fire. They did not have any concerns. I think
Correct.
we're at a point here where we can close this public hearing unless I see any other hands, which I don't. So I'd like to entertain a motion to close the public hearing for 17 Pine Street site plan modification.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. We'll do a roll call vote. Gary Sullivan,
Aye.
Melissa Mayo,
Aye.
Chris Montfort,
Aye.
my chair, Chad Peck votes aye, and Gary Sullivan. Awesome. Excellent. So we do have our public hearing is closed. We will now look at the draft decision. So we have where is that? Yep, Rich prepared a draft decision for 17 Pine Street. That is draft decision 2024-13. Looking at it now, so it looks like the only change we would make is what we discussed with adding a condition to allow for parking safety mechanisms per direction of the EEC.
Yes.
I'm looking at I mean, it's pretty simple decision. Anybody else have any comments on that? I see no hands. Okay, I'd like to entertain a motion to approve the site plan modification for 17 Pine Street, decision number 2024-13 as printed, with one addition to add a condition to allow for parking safety mechanisms to be installed if needed as per direction of the EEC.
Moved.
So that has been moved. Do I have a second?
Second.
And seconded. So we'll do a roll call vote. Gary Sullivan,
Aye.
Melissa Mayo,
Aye.
Chris Montfort,
Aye.
and myself, Chad Peck votes aye, and Gary
Aye. Aye.
Excellent. All right. So we do have that approved site decision. So Betsy, it sounds like Betsy will have that updated and ready for us to sign on Monday of next week. Right, Betsy?
That's correct. Yep.
Yeah. I swear, every time the screen moves, everybody jumps around. So Molly, good luck on the project.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I really appreciate all your time.
Yep, thank you.
Guys.
Good
Thank
evening.
you.
Thanks, bye.
Bye-bye.
And I extend a sincere thank you for Melissa, who was under the weather, who joined us to take care of those two public hearings tonight.
Yes, thank you very much, Melissa.
No problem. I don't want to push them out a month. Is there anything else that we need to vote on that can't wait until we have our next meeting on the 27th? I think we have some meeting notes. I don't know if there's anything else that's quick.
There's meeting notes, but those could wait.
Those could wait.
I think that's all.
All right. I look forward to watching this recording then tomorrow.
Feel better.
Thank you, Melissa.
Next day.
All right,
Feel
feel
better.
better.
Bye.
Melissa.
Get
you.
well.
Bye, guys.
Bye. All right, so our next item is we have 7:30. We have an appointment for MAPC fiscal analysis for the inclusionary bylaw as it relates to mixed use. So I see Alexis is here from MAPC. So Alexis, I'm gonna hand it off to you and let you introduce yourself and show us what wonderful things you have for us regarding the inclusionary bylaw.
Sure, thanks. I'm here with my colleague, Jiwon Park.
Okay.
And actually, Rich, I don't know if you wanted to say a word or two to introduce why we're doing this work.
Sure.
That's probably good. Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. Set the stage. As you recall, we quite a few years ago, back in 2021, we made some zoning revisions to the B1 center zoning to try to see if we can unlock some mixed-use development opportunities in town center. At that time, there was a series of zoning changes that were put forth from town meeting, were approved. And at the same time, knowing that there may be some things that might need some adjustments depending upon how the market conditions are in terms of mixed-use development opportunities. And then the pandemic hit, and which has changed things in many ways, not only from a market condition, but even from a construction standpoint. So what we're attempting to do with this study is take a look at it holistically from the zoning that's in place in the B1 zoning. In addition to that, the companion piece, which is in the inclusionary bylaw, to see the effects of facilitating mixed-use development, what changes might need to be made in both cases. So through that, we've engaged MAPC to do some analysis. They have a presentation to go over those 2 points, and this is for the whole entire B1 district. And through that process, we reached out. I had them reach out to existing property owners, have considered mixed-use development. Developer who had a 40B already, which was potentially interested in maybe converting to a mixed-use development under the zoning as opposed to going the 40B route. Some developers, if you will, that were interested in maybe purchasing property and converting it to all residential. So we've had a mix of developers or property owners kind of weigh in and offer their thoughts on both the inclusionary bylaw and the zoning. So I'll tee it up from there and I'll hand it over to Alexis, and the idea is presentation, go through that first, and then we'll come back for Q&A, and we certainly can jump back to slides as we go through. It's all yours, Alexis.
I'm going to share my screen. I think I'm not the host yet. Could you make me the host so that I can share my screen?
We all set?
Thank you. Can you all see my screen? Perfect.
Yep.
I will make it to the full screen mode. Thanks for a great introduction, Rich. And yeah, that's pretty much really captures well about the background of this project. Again, my name is Jiwon Park. I'm a regional land use planner at the MEPC, and I'm managing this project and working with Alexa Smith, who's joined with me tonight on this project together. So yeah, today's agenda for this presentation is I'll briefly go over the overview of the project, which Rich already laid out pretty eloquently, and share the progress to date, and then walk you through kind of existing conditions analysis we've done, looking at the Norfolk zoning bylaw and looking into other data set. And also we'll share some key takeaways from the developer interviews. We have interviewed 6 developers so far. And lastly, we'll share policy scenarios and some preliminary feasibility analysis that is very much in a draft and up for discussion, tonight. So briefly about the project review, as Rich mentioned, analyzing kind of feasibility of development in the town center under the current zoning, with a focus on looking at how inclusionary zoning bylaw and mixed use requirement impact the development feasibility. Overall, the project is comprised of 4 different pieces, looking at context, including local context analysis and market context analysis. During this analysis period, we look at the zoning bylaw, and also analyze parcel data to understand like the size and types of parcels in the town center district, and also review the development projects that were proposed and also kind of developed in the past. And we also look at 40B development projects to understand how the financials work in the housing development in Norfolk. Also, we look at market context, looking at some industry data to understand like the cost of building housing in the similar market with Norfolk, and there are data specific to Norfolk as well. Like we try to understand the average rent and home prices in Norfolk through those data. And also we interview developers to understand their experience in developing in Norfolk, and kind of try to understand their experience in general, to kind of complement that quantitative data analysis piece. And we're now here doing kind of feasibility analysis based on those 2 analyses and interviewing developers. We try to develop policy options that the town can consider, and then conduct the kind of pro forma analysis to see how those policy options make development feasible, and to understand the feasibility of different development projects in the case of those policy scenarios. And the last step is developing recommendations with the discussions with the planning board and the town planner. So quickly walking through existing conditions, we looked at the B1 district here, and this is pretty straightforward. This is a zoning map of Norfolk. And we understand the current mixed-use zoning have 3 big components. The first is the square footage of residential dwelling units be 65% or less of the total combined square footage of residential and commercial structure. So there's specific numbers attached to how much the ratio between residential and commercial space in the mixed-use development. And the second piece is that the footprint of residential structure has to be equal to or less than the footprint of the commercial structure. So that is specifically relevant to horizontal mixed-use scenario where residential footprint of the residential structure can exceed the footprint of commercial structure. Lastly, the commercial structure has to be constructed prior to residential occupancy. And these two diagrams are kind of visualization of what this mixed use development could look like based on the current requirement, and kind of showing the same density for vertical and horizontal mixed use. For the current inclusionary zoning, the current inclusionary zoning is applied to the project 6 or more residential units. And it has kind of tiered system where different affordable unit requirements are applied for different project size. But the affordability level is the same of 80% AMI across the different type of projects. And the compliance method, in terms of compliance method, basically all three options, on-site unit, on-site construction, off-site construction, and in lieu fee options are allowed through a special permit. But for in lieu fee specifically, it only applies to the for sale development, and the amount of that cash payment is determined by difference between the median single family home sales price and the price affordable to qualified purchaser that is guided by the EOHLC. So yeah, I will turn it over to Alexis to walk you through developer interviews and the preliminary feasibility analysis results.
Right. Thanks, Juan, and thanks to the members of the planning board for hearing the presentation tonight. So as Rich and Juan mentioned, we interviewed 6 developers who are familiar with development in Norfolk, and we have a couple of high-level takeaways. Biggest one is that the law, the bylaw as written is both too restrictive and too prescriptive. There's a lot of numerical requirements that just don't allow for the flexibility that is often needed to undertake a site-specific development. Specifically, the requirement for commercial, I should say the extent to which commercial is required relative to residential development. Overall, developers, commercial development is hard. It's a lot riskier than residential development. Several developers that we spoke with said that they have to assume in a market like Norfolk's that the residential income from residential rents is essentially entirely subsidizing the commercial spaces, at least until a project is up and running and occupied. Lenders often require the same thing, that level of assumption. Lenders will underwrite the residential part of a project, but are reluctant to undertake the riskier commercial piece. And then also that turnover is high, or can be high, and that every time a commercial tenant turns over, you kind of go through the same process again of trying to find someone that fits. Next slide, please. Another piece which we hadn't asked specifically about, but that came up with several developers, was that the dimensional requirements don't allow for enough residential unit. As I mentioned previously, since a lot of folks are using the residential units to cross subsidize a commercial space that may be empty for a year or more, you need a certain number of residential units to accomplish that. And even though, and 16 units an acre zoning, which is what's currently permitted in town center, is just not achieving that. There's a couple of other pieces of the bylaw that additionally restrict how much residential development can happen, notably the height of 3 stories. Next slide, please. The other piece that we looked into is inclusionary zoning. I will say I've done work on inclusionary zoning all over Greater Boston, and 20% is on the high end of what is required for affordable housing in multifamily development. And developers, have essentially said that you know, that on top of everything else is, you know, is a hit as well. It can be challenging, particularly for, even though the smallest projects, as Giovanna mentioned, aren't required to do 20%, they're 10 or 15%. You know, even that is just kind of one thing that puts a development closer and closer to being infeasible. And another piece which can't be governed by zoning, but which is really important to mention here. We would be remiss if we didn't bring it up. Every single person we spoke with mentioned sewer. And so even though that's not something that can be controlled by zoning, it's something that really impacts feasibility. And so, you know, it's something that the town will need to take into account when it's balancing, you know, what is possible to build in the town center. Next slide, please. So all that is to say, the high level takeaway, what we heard from folks, is that, you know, it's not necessarily any one particular thing, but it's all of these things together that make essentially the existing bylaw effectively unworkable. It's, you know, it's not just, if it was the inclusionary on its own, like, you know, you might be able to figure that out. If it was just, you know, a 16 units an acre density without the commercial requirement, like, sure, that would totally work. But it's all of these things together that just keep adding up, and like death by 1,000 cuts. And so the important thing to remember there, I mean, the positive piece side of that is that there's a lot that the town can work with then in terms of deciding, focusing priorities and deciding what's possible and what you all want to see from development. But right now, the takeaway is that the current zoning as written is just asking too much of development, which is why no one is really bitten to move anything in town center. Next slide, please. So what we did was we looked at a couple of different variations on policy options that would address some of what we heard. This is a starting point for discussion. There are no specific recommendations here, but what we're hoping to hear from y'all tonight is, you know, are these things tenable? Are any of these things non-starters? And then we'll kind of take your feedback back and refine our analysis. We just, you know, this is a gut check-in to make sure we're heading in a direction that is palatable for the town. So next slide, please. So we looked at a couple of different variations on the mixed use piece, which is, I think it's fair to say that was probably the biggest hurdle for developers. And, you know, I think that's probably not surprising to anyone in this room. So as a reminder, the current zoning requires the entire ground floor to be commercial. For the sake of this example, we're just looking at vertical mixed use. So, you know, but you could also just, you know, for a horizontal mixed use, you could also say, you know, 35% of the square footage. But anyways, so first one we're looking at is 100% of the frontage. So the commercial development or ground floor commercial development or commercial development all along the street frontage, but behind that, residential units. The second option, policy option that we looked at is setting a minimum requirement that 35% of the ground floor frontage be used for active commercial use. This one was modeled in part after Foxborough's town center zoning, which I believe the requirement there is 25%, but it was kind of was cited as a successful precedent that has actually had some, you know, of course, Foxborough is a different animal, but, you know, the town center is, you know, not the stadium, but the town center is still seeing some really nice mixed use projects, actually. So, you know, that's another option that we looked at. And the final option was what we're calling a portion of the ground floor frontage. So essentially, that's a flexible, more flexible bylaw. This would be something that would be the portion is not not necessarily specified, and we are anticipating that would be something that is more of a conversation between the planning board and the developer. There are some locations where more than what is shown here would make sense. If there's sewer, if it's right along the main, right in the town center, if there's sidewalks, all of that. If the topography works out, in those situations, the planning board and the developer might opt for more than what's shown here. In other situations, if the lot faces a less busy street, or no sewer, just this sort of option would give the planning board flex and the developer flexibility to kind of work something out. Yes, thank you.
Oops, sorry.
And we also looked at two different variations on the inclusionary bylaw. The first one would look at kind of stepping up the in lieu, the option to pay with an in lieu fee. We used a slightly different in lieu fee than what is currently written into the bylaw, which I can get into if folks have questions about that. But the recommendation is generally allowing developers up to 20 units the option to satisfy the inclusionary requirements with an in lieu fee rather than on-site units. It wouldn't be mandated, but for a lot of developers, especially small ones, keeping up with doing a deed restricted affordable unit is just a hurdle. And so in this scenario, they would make a payment to the town to support affordable housing rather than build the housing on site. And also this would cover allowing that for ownership units as well, which the on-site affordable ownership units, because of the great discrepancy between the market sales price and the affordable sales price, is pretty much how you would make this work if a developer was interested in doing an ownership project. The second option, we just essentially lowered the percentage of affordable units down from 10 to 20% affordable down to 10 to 15% affordable. Next slide, please. So just to jumping back to the town center, just to remind folks what's going on down there, there's kind of a range of lots, a range of conditions, which makes it challenging, but also again provides some options for flexibility. Next slide, please. So again, this is just kind of spelling out, or we took an example project and looked at, okay, under the current zoning, this is what you could build. In this hypothetical example project, say a 20 residential units and close to 8,000 square foot of commercial space, which is what would be required under current zoning. And then the other three options are just what these various mixed use scenarios might look like. I know we didn't take the 16 units an acre density cap into account here. What we're modeling is, what we're trying to get at is essentially, part of the advantage of part of the advantage in terms of feasibility of enabling less commercial and more residential is that you can use that, you fill that space with residential units, and then those residential units offset the cost of the commercial space. So it's more of an exercise to assess feasibility than anything else. But as we move down the line, more reducing the commercial requirement also results in additional residential units, which help cross subsidize it. Next slide, please. So this is kind of a representation of the analysis that we did. Essentially, there's two big pieces here. The first piece is that if you look in the upper left-hand corner, that's kind of what we're looking at under current zoning, and that is very unprofitable to the extent that nothing is getting built. As we move down the line horizontally, or down that table horizontally, we reduce the mixed use requirements and take a look at how that impacts feasibility. And then the vertical columns are for the reduced inclusionary zoning requirements. And essentially, unsurprisingly, as you reduce the mixed use requirements, feasibility increases, and for inclusionary zoning, when you reduce the number of required affordable units, feasibility increases. when you allow developers the option of swapping out an in lieu fee for on-site units feasibility increases. And so what we're hoping to get your feedback on tonight is, you know, how palatable are these policy options? We appreciate that all, you know, and you know, what is the right direction for us to be going in terms of what we're analyzing, and then what else can we incorporate? If the town feels really strongly that, you know, y'all want 100% of the ground floor coverage to be mixed use commercial, that is certainly, you know, that's certainly doable, but it means that there will be a substantial adjustment to the inclusionary requirements and potentially the density requirements in order to balance that. It's really, all of this is just about what are the town can't ask for everything. And so what we're hoping to hear from you all is, you know, what are your priorities and what should we be trying to maximize in order to use other levers to balance mixed use, affordability, density, whatever the case may be. So I'll stop there and see if there are any questions. And you can, I think we
do have
yeah.
a question. The ground floor frontage, how are you determining how much that is from the front to the back?
We essentially said, let me think, is if a typical double loaded corridor on a residential building is like what, 70 feet deep. And so we assumed here that on the ground floor, the back end would be residential and the front half would be commercial. So I'd say about 40 feet deep here. That's not necessarily what would get built, but we're using some approximations.
No, that's fair. And then my follow-up question to that would be, we're looking at the 35% possibly as a minimum. It doesn't necessarily mean that they can't decide to use 100% of the first floor space if they choose,
yes,
or any variety in between there. So if they decide,
yes,
hey, you know what, this is a corner lot, perfect spot for a restaurant, let's use all of the frontage that we have on this side, and then we'll just do residential for the remainder, that they can do that as well.
Yes, yes. The assumption is that a full ground floor mixed use would still be an option. Of the developers that we spoke with, most cited the commercial requirement as an impediment. But a couple different folks did say that, you know, people who are good at developing, their developers tend to specialize and be good at residential or be good at commercial, which is part of why the mixed use is a challenge. We did speak to one developer who was very comfortable with commercial development, and, you know, said that there's you know, situations where that might work, and we certainly wouldn't want to preclude that. But it's the prescriptive requirement that's the impediment.
Yeah, and so Gary, I guess this is a question for you because you did a lot of the work on the B1. With regards to having retail on the ground floor, were you anticipating having like deliveries come in through a backside of the building, trash in and out through the front, back? Like, were there any considerations or thought to that with regards to why we wanted to do 100% of the ground floor?
I'm not sure if we got into that level of detail. The 100% was more of a, how do we fit, you know, so if we look at the feedback of residents and what they wanted in downtown, how do we fit that in and kind of test the waters? You know, there was a lot of discussion about what the right number was, whether, you know, 100%, 80%, something like that. But, and, you know, Chad, I think you were on those meetings too, but, you know, we were like, hey, let's see what we can get. And of course, pandemic happened and all the numbers have changed. So we were like, maybe we'll get some sort of interest in 100% commercial. That's completely changed now. So we kind of knew that was going to be a stretch. We did not expect magically every available lot to be rebuilt as 100% commercial on the ground floor.
That makes sense. Yeah.
I was on at the tail end of the B1, and I don't recall us getting into that much detail, Chris, as far as what you mentioned.
Yeah, I'm just
Loading,
curious because like
unloading, trash.
once you start thinking about retail and all of the things that
Yep.
it takes to actually operate a store or a restaurant, you have considerations such as, you know, where's the kitchen going to go? Where are they going to load in the food? What is your access going to be for trash? Are you loading in through the front of the building, or you have side access or rear access? You know, even employee parking has to be considered as well.
Yep.
And so, like, while I think it makes sense for a storefront to have front to back footage, I don't know that it necessarily needs to be everywhere on the first floor. I think I'm teetering very much between 2 and 3. I can see why we would want the frontage to be completely, you know, taken care of from that perspective, like an aesthetics perspective, creating a very vibrant town center. But at the same time, I can kind of understand like having the portion of the ground floor just be residential and, you know, a different type of use and have it interspersed. But I like the flexibility with the planning board approval. That way we can kind of like own that aesthetic, right? Like thinking of like Back Bay in Boston, right? Like with the brownstones, and then here you have a nice little cozy coffee shop, and then you have another brownstone with a nice stairwell to go up, and you have some residential on the first floor, but then a couple doors down, you have another another shop right there, right? Like it kind of lends to that feel.
Yep.
Sounds like we could solve it by adding a 4th floor. Just saying, I remember at the time that it was a huge discussion, but you know, you look around, Franklin isn't, they don't seem to have a problem. You drive through the center of their town, they have everything is complete, mixed use buildings, everything that's new, and all commercial on the ground level, and 3 levels of apartments. I know that it perhaps didn't fit our plan at the time. I remember Josh was leading a lot of the meetings, and when we had a lot of the townspeople show up, there was something about the way that it was understood that they didn't like the 4th floor, even though we're over 40 feet high. They didn't like having a 4th floor. That's just one comment. And I guess I would ask Alexis. It seems like the developers did a lot of complaining about what our requirements are. Did they say that town over there, they have the best requirements? We love building there. Where did they point to? Where did they point to that was so much better than us?
Sorry, and they did a lot. They provided a lot of constructive feedback because we were digging for it and asking for, you know, what's working, what's not. I think I already mentioned Foxborough. 2 different developers cited Foxborough as a town that's working, as a place that's working. So we went and just looked at their bylaw directly. We also just, you know, we've been doing these studies all over the region. And so in general, it's kind of a threading the needle of providing flexibility while still being clear on expectations. So like in that third scenario of a portion of the ground floor, I think, you know, we ultimately, if you know, the board is ultimately interested in that one, we would probably want to put some frameworks around, like, you know, a portion could be anything. You know, provide some clarity around the town's expectations. But yeah, Foxborough came to mind. Franklin was also cited by at least one person, although Franklin, I appreciate, is a little more dense than Norfolk. And so we were kind of looking more to Foxborough as a model.
Okay. Don't we currently have in lieu of payments, Rich, for developers, or is it not in mixed use?
It's ownership only. Not if it's rental.
Okay, I get it. And with regard to the sewer plan, I lost sight of everything that was going on. I knew that nothing's happening down at the school. Does that mean we no longer have a sewer plan that was proposed to be on, was it going to be an abatement at one point where people that tied in would pay for the use of it?
So in terms of the sewering town center, to get additional sewer flow, the current direction is to pursue purchasing some sewer flow from the Department of Corrections, their wastewater treatment plant that they have. And just for context, in the time when we were doing the B1 study, we're also doing the sewer wastewater master plan for the town center. At that time, Cedar Junction was occupied. They had just gone through a process to upgrade their plant from permit requirements. And so at that time, they weren't interested in, taking on a customer per se. Since that time, the Cedar Junction has closed down. They still have there's still operation, but there is potential availability of flow there. So the plan would be to acquire flow from them. Where we're at presently is to try to see if we can work through the Department of Corrections and Department of Capital Asset Management to get to a level where somebody could say, yeah, I think, you could have X for a flow. And then when we can get to that point, then we could go back in to pursue some grant funding to do the feasibility analysis. Would be a gravity system, and just the town would just become a sewer user and get rid of the package treatment plant that we currently have in town center. So that's a
And
little
it would
bit.
support, the whole district.
It would support the whole district. So we would purchase flow, so that way the current plan is 30,000 gallons per day. So it would accommodate that flow and additional build out town center.
Okay.
One of the, just to add a little color to this in terms of the previous study that we did in 2021, we were in a little different point in terms of, a big part of that process was just try to convey to town residents and interested folks that residential and mixed use is a necessity to make these projects happen and come off the ground. So that, there was more work, as we led into those studies. Well, we know people want to do residential development, but we don't want to have it all residential and no commercial. So that was kind of the tug and pull, if you recall back then, of what that looks like. Excuse me. And so I think people came around to the idea of understanding that you need to have a little bit more residential from a feasibility standpoint. In terms of the whole idea of the ground floor, yeah, we didn't get into, there was a little specific discussion, but I think as it was illustrated by Alexis in the example, we have a few sites in town that, ground floor works, but then you also have sites where the grade in comparison, the site in terms of Main Street and Rockwood Road may serve where you could have a mix. You could have residential, if you will, on the ground floor, a commercial sandwiched in between, and then a residential above. So the takeaway, at least from this, is really kind of directing towards there needs to be flexibility, which you all just talked about a little bit tonight. For example, prescribe the units per acre, which I know people appreciate, right? It's there, but then when you apply that, when you look at where the liquor store is on Rockwood Road, the mixed-use building there, that's not a big site. So when you apply units per acre, it really becomes extremely infeasible to make an investment in that, to upgrade the building, maybe sell it off for somebody to tear it down and bring it back up. It just doesn't, the numbers won't work because you're talking about 13 residential dwelling units. So 13 is just it's insignificant in terms of the financial feasibility of it. So my summation on this is, I don't know where we go necessarily in terms of, but having flexibility for both the town and the planning board and developer is where that kind of needs to fall somewhere in between there. And I think which is important too, which Alexis made. And I think as we talked about the inclusionary on itself is not the house of cards that fall down. Okay, it's a piece of the puzzle.
Well, I think we know what we have now isn't working. And we're not seeing any development because it's not working, and we've asked. It's not that we're just living in our own little silo here. I mean, we've asked the questions like why is no one developing? Well, it's several things, but one of it is the inclusionary zoning.
No, agree.
So, and that's a big part of it. So, probably one of the biggest hurdles that they have to overcome. It's just like you show here on the screen, it's just the profitability of it. It becomes very challenging for them to want to get a foothold and build anything in our town, in the town center.
And it becomes, go ahead.
I just had one questions to ask on the inclusionary zoning piece. Thinking about the in lieu fee, there are 3 compliance methods that are permitted through special permit. And I was wondering, like, what are the kind of criteria that you consider in deciding the compliance method for inclusionary policy, so that I think that information could be important for us to consider when it comes to like how we could position introducing in lieu fee option in this compliance methods.
So that was a great question. And I'll reiterate my response that I said leading up to tonight, is that you don't have necessarily a breadth of projects in terms of that you can go in your bag to look back. We had payment in lieu, which was a single family ownership project. We had another off-site affordable, which was a single family home development. So everything has been single family home related. With the exception, we do have one, which is a duplex project. They're going to be doing a within the development because of the type of development they're doing. I know you already know this. There's not a big list to go back and say, hey, what about this? So just there,
Yeah.
I can tell you, as we had talked about this, when people come in and look at it from a developer mixed use standpoint, the rental has a whole nother layer of compliance requirements that happen on an annual basis, which makes it even more challenging to try to manage on a smaller scale.
Yeah. And I think that smaller, this is not just related to what folks who have been developers who have been active in Norfolk have said, but just universally, it is the huge developers, the Avalons, who they have someone on staff who's just full-time doing compliance and doing these, deed restriction, these affordable deed restrictions. But the smaller local outfits, which are, the smaller and the smaller developments, which are generally, the kind of developments the town likes, that I would assume the town likes to see, that many towns I work with like to see, the 20 unit developments or whatever else, those are the developers in the types of developments that really struggle with on-site affordable units, because they don't have somebody on staff who knows how to do this, who knows to check in every year and do the recertification, who knows how to run a fair housing affordable, who knows how to run a lottery, who knows how to do a fair housing affordable, a market plan, and has to hire somebody else out to do all of those things. And so really just providing room for folks to, it's one way to kind of tip the feasibility lever in the development's favor, which in turn allows the town to ask for a little bit more of something that it wants, like commercial, like whatever else.
Okay. Anything else from Alexis from MAPC? Alexis G1?
No, I think just what we would love to hear from you all tonight or tonight, or you know, from relating it to Rich later on, is just, you know, which direction makes sense. You know, if there's anything that's automatically off the table, that's useful for us to know. If the town would like us to explore, like, okay, well, what does this potential this portion mean? I think the planning board member who spoke earlier about the depth of the retail made an excellent point, that the way we're looking at it shows, you know, a shallow mixed use, which is not even really what a lot of developers like to build. Most commercial spaces would rather have kind of like a tight storefront with loading in the back. So, you know, if the planning board is open to allowing that flexibility, or to having some portions of the frontage be residential and not all commercial, then we can start to look at a little bit more of that nuance. We can look at how much commercial might be enabled if one of the planning board members mentioned earlier a fourth story or additional density. You know, we won't bother to analyze it if that's a non-starter, but if that's something that you're interested in, we can say, like, all right, if you had a fourth story, you could ask for this much affordability or this much commercial. Really what we're here to get, hoping to get a sense from you on where the traction points are, so that we can give you a more thorough analysis the next iteration.
So a lot of things that you mentioned, right? Like, you know, we can definitely have conversations about, and I'm speaking just on behalf of myself, right? But it is an elected position, and the feedback from the residents of the town is 4 stories just not even it's just not a starter. It's just not a starter.
No, and that's good to know.
The idea of having a walkable downtown is the key. Now, does that mean 100% frontage for commercial? No, not necessarily, right? We can find plenty of examples. However, if the conversation needs to turn to what we want currently and most likely in the future is financially an impossibility for the average developer, then we need to take that and say, all right, so can we build support in the, you know, or an understanding with the residents that we need something like a 4th floor, you know, something. So, I mean, these are just really good numbers to have. When we went through the B1 planning process, you know, and as somebody else mentioned, Josh was leading that for MAPC for us. And we just like, we would look at these matrices for like, I swear, hours, just to understand where the sweet spots were. And, you know, we fully understood them then. And again, the maths changed, but even then it's like, listen, the 4th floor is just not, you know, on the table, and picking numbers knowing that we don't even have the sewer infrastructure to support it is mildly mind-numbing. But, you know, I think we'll get back to that part of the conversation as well.
What do you think? You said if a 4th floor is kind of like a non-starter, what about within the envelope of just a 3-story building, changing the density requirements, which are current? So the 3-story building, but allowing a couple of extra units within the same envelope. Does that have the same kind of like anathema as a 4th story?
I mean, it depends on, if you just say we need high density, that verbiage right there, that's a red flag for a lot of people. But, you know, here's what helped with the B1 process, I think, in my opinion, when we did community feedback sessions, was having visuals. Actually, this worked for planning board really well when we did the signage bylaws. Have visuals, because people, when you say things, people just automatically jump to worst case scenario in their head, right? It's like, let's do 4 stories, and then everybody's thinking about those giant wall pole things that went up off the train tracks in the last 10 years. And like, no, we never want that. It's like, okay, but there's plenty of 4-story buildings I think they'd really, really love. We just have to show them and then kind of build support and guidance to try to, you know, ease developers to thinking that sort of thing instead of big giant box with max density and some balconies that look like they're going to fall off the building next Tuesday.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, and if 4 stories truly is a non-starter for the town, then that's okay. But then in that case, in that situation, it becomes a matter of, then, you know, then something else has to give, whether
That's
it's
something else
affordability.
has to give. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and that's where, maybe, and, there's a matrix that we need to analyze, because that just like, if you go 4-story, then you can keep the inclusionary bylaw the way it is. But if you stay with 3-story, stay with density, well, the next thing that's got to give is the inclusionary, because it just is not economically feasible for a developer to do this. So it's kind of that give and take. And there needs to be somehow that needs to get explained or visualized to them. I think all of us on the call understand that, but it just, it's challenging sometimes to understand that until you make it visually.
So it sounds like that's the next step for us then, is to, we certainly can start providing some of those visuals, to explain.
Yeah, there was a really good, what was that in? Was it in the master plan? I think it was in the master plan, or was it no, it was the 111 Dedham Street that the MAPC helped do an analysis on. It was, we asked for community feedback, and it was like a whole list of things, but then that they wanted to see at that site. But then it was, here's economic feasibility to develop the site to cover the cost of the remediation of the site, and that was a different list. But then you overlap those, and then you found the sweet spot of what could be done that was financially feasible for a developer and also seemed to be appetizing to the community.
Mm-hmm.
So I know we have
a couple questions. People have their hands raised.
Yeah, we do. And we also question and probably comment. I know Bill Chazen's on, who was, if you recall, was looking at 220 Main Street, which is kind of on the way far fringe of the B1 district, which is a mixed-use building, but it's vacant on the first floor. And I thought I'd let him offer a couple comments as they looked at that property. Bill, you want to speak?
Yeah, sure. Look, I mean, I appreciate the opportunity to speak here, and I'll sort of reiterate what I said in my consulting meetings with the consultants was, first of all, what you have in Norfolk is an incredible asset. It is a beautiful, walkable, suburban to rural town. It's gorgeous, and it's a place where everybody wants to be. Everyone wants to live, myself included. It's fantastic. But you guys have an incredible challenge because you're dealing with a populace and a voting bloc that wants what they want, and they don't want any of the things that come with it. Density is what is required for retail. You have to have density. I forget who was saying it, but even when you have these mixed-use buildings and you have retail loading, retail trash, retail employee parking, and retail customer parking, that is a very different requirement than residential, and they oftentimes conflict with each other. And that's why when you go to New York City or Boston or even these walkable places, most of the buildings are single use. It's a residential building with a doorman at the bottom. They're not mixed, unless it's on the best street corner or it is an uber dense place. But you don't have that here in Norfolk, and you don't have it in the vast majority of towns in Massachusetts. But retail requires density, and without that, you are not going to find retailers that want to come and lease and occupy these spaces until you'll end up with dark retail, which will be a counter to what it is you're trying to create. And so the ultimate contradiction here is that every town planner in the country wants a walkable downtown, and it is a glorious, objective and goal. But the reality is the vast majority of towns cannot support that. And I don't think you can either without density. And so if going to a fourth floor is off the table, I think and going to single use residential buildings are off the table. I believe it takes retail, it makes it not feasible. When you have retail in your town center right now that is vacant and has been vacant for a number of years, adding 15 units above that does not all of a sudden make that viable retail. So if you look at a town like Natick, which has going east to west, here's the other thing you need. Going east to west, it has the Mass Pike, it has Route 9, it has Route 135. Going north to south on the east side and the west side, it's sandwiched between Route 495 and 128. So you end up with a large amount of traffic that's coming through town. So their downtown is walkable because they have a significant amount of density downtown. They've got a train stop and they've got 3 east-west connectors that are bringing these people to town. And they still have a challenge with it. You do not have those things. And so where I get caught up is the conflict and the contradiction that you guys have to deal with. And it's a tough challenge because you've got to educate a population that wants a walkable downtown, but doesn't want anything to do with the sort of density that is required. And with that, I'll just turn it back over to you guys and say, look, that's the real world problem. And that's what you got to figure out. And all the consultants in the world can say we can lower the inclusionary zoning, from 329 to 320. Residential folks want to build and they generally can make it happen. But with every additional regulation and every additional requirement, it becomes a tax that knocks these projects further out of the box. And so I'll just leave that for you to discuss, noodle on, call BS on it, whatever you want to do. That's the reality of it. And so thanks for letting me chime in.
Thank you. Appreciate that, William. We do have Peter's had his hand up for a long time. Peter Diamond, you want to go?
Thank you to the chair and questions towards Alexis and Jaiwan. And on the payment in lieu for the downtown area, which is near the T, I think that would be a big loss for having affordable housing in the downtown area, and I would be not in favor of that. I like the reduction in the 20% cap to 15% in that scaled inclusionary bylaw, but I don't like payment in lieu for the downtown area because you just lose all those affordable units near the T. Thank you.
Yep. Thank you, Peter. Appreciate that comment. Chris Montfort.
So what Bill said resonates very well. I think that's where we're at, right? We're in a rock and a hard place right now. And with regards to Peter's comment, I think there's definitely a middle ground to be had, right? Like, I think if we do ever think about entertaining the payment in lieu, there has to be a cap to it. It can't be for all of the units. It can be for a portion, perhaps. I'd like to understand, like, what would that look like if we decided to do that? Ideally, like, I think option 3 makes the most sense for us from a downtown perspective. I'd love to understand, like, what would that look like if we put pen to paper and wanted to, like, expound and provide documents to the town and say, if we did do this and it was only a portion of some of the frontage, this is what possibilities you have from a store perspective. Imagine walking down Main Street and these are the types of businesses that you'll see. I think, we really need to drive some density to this location in order for those businesses to flourish, to stay there long term. The ones that are there now, I don't ever see them like insanely busy, right? Like, sometimes I wonder how, this Walgreens is the one that's not closing down versus some of the other ones that are in our area that are closing down. Is it because it's the largest grocery kind of retail that we have in the center of town? Probably. But at the same time, it's not like a must-have considering what we have available if we're already driving to begin with, right? But if we're looking to have people that are going to be in town, hopefully not need a car because we have the commuter rail right there, so that they can have easy access to Boston for jobs. What are we providing them in turn, right? I think that's the important thing that we have to answer.
Yeah, well said, Chris. All right, so what's the next steps here? Rich, what do we go from
Sure.
here?
I guess is that feedback, does that give you a little bit to kind of work with what you've heard?
Yeah, that gives us some things to work with. I think we can get a little bit more detailed in what we're looking at. Unfortunately, as much as I would love to be able to provide specific details about, you know, what kind of businesses might be interested, it depends on sewer more than anything else. We have heard pretty universally that, you know, like an accountant's office, sewer's fine, but you want to put a restaurant in, you need sewer. And so there's a lot of variability. Like, I know that this is not a great answer for a planning board because it's not a thing that the planning board has control over, but do you want to underscore the sewer issue? And then also just a lot of it depends. We can look a bit into size of the commercial spaces. That makes a difference, and get a little bit more refined, and then kind of come back to you with some additional options, some more refined options, let's say.
I think one of the things we were doing with the initial pass on B1 was we were thinking through not likely outcomes necessarily, but you know, what would be viable if you know, infrastructure was in place, sewer in place. And then, you know, 10, 15, 20, 30 years, what would the population in Norfolk be? So, you know, like that's just me saying we're not, or at least from my perspective, from a planning board, we're not trying to figure out how to get something built for 2027. And, you know, it's just like we need to make decisions based off what's best for the town looking forward, right? So being able to think through those options a little bit more clearly, understanding the, you know, the limits on the infrastructure currently, but in the, you know, in the future that could change. Like those, you know, that's good to know. And I'm willing to take some time and go through, because we've got a bunch of community feedback, and I would not expect you to go through all of it. There's quite a bit of it, but between the B1 from 4 or 5 years ago, and then the, you know, the Southwood Hospital site, you know, there's a lot of or in the, you know, the master plan stuff as well. There's a lot of feedback that seems to align in the same spot over and over again. But you know, I think the developer Bill, he mentioned this, and we've all mentioned it between ourselves at various points in the last couple of years. Like, there's no reason why we can't, you know, think through what's best for the town and then pitch it, right? Like, hey, here's why this can work. And so if you know, if you think that's helpful, I can go and kind of take all the feedback I think is important and would fit in with this specific ask, and that might help you understand where the residents are from a feeling perspective.
Yeah, and I think thank you. I think even more important than that will be what you all as town leaders think might be able to might work at town meeting. Where what are absolute non-starters versus places where, you know, where people might be open to change, and, you know, some education. I think what makes sense to me, and Rich, please jump in, as our next deliverable will be, right now we kind of just gave you a spectrum of like, okay, you know, this is work more or less in the direction that you want to be going. We can give you some more specific options of, okay, with a density of this, an affordability of this, and a mixed use requirement of this, we think this will work. With a different density of this, you know, with keeping the existing density, this is what we think the affordable and commercial. We can give you a couple of different options, or I mean, separate. There's kind of infinite combinations, but we can give you a couple of different options, and then perhaps from there, you can give us or Rich feedback on, you know, which of those feels like the right balance of priorities, because any of these are possible. It's just, but all of them are not possible.
No, right. And that's what I was kind of
But
thinking. you build some sort of a matrix or a table or whatever you want to
Yeah.
call it, and you'll start to see that the sweet spots, I guess you call, or what
Yeah.
works. I don't, maybe sweet spot's not a right, but what potentially works.
Yeah. And so I think so our next step will be to give you some more specifics about where we think the sweet spots might be.
Okay.
If that works for y'all.
And this might be too much to do this, but I feel like does it make any sense to have, all right, here's a scenario where we have a ground up site, vacant, what that development looks like there. Then we have a couple of examples of, okay, existing building, what a partial may be, how that could work, and then where the economics are, either you sell it or you develop it where you tear it down and rebuild new, just to kind of apply it to these different. I feel like that might be too much, but just to kind of illustrate, because the one thing that was helpful with Southwood was things kind of started to come around the idea that here we have a property owner who has a potential development approach to the property of which is essentially that district, but it was more tangible. Like here's a project, and you can look at it a little bit better to analyze. Okay, this is what we're talking about. You know, like your example. All right, it's a ground up site. It's 4 stories. Maybe there's some retail on it and separate residential buildings. And this is what that may look like. Then here's another one, which is a partial redevelopment on a site, like how that works versus the other. So people can maybe feel a little bit more, if you follow me.
Yeah. We'll take a stab at that, and then we'll confer with you about, you know, how consistent that is with what you're envisioning.
Okay. I guess the last question then is to the planning board. Do we at least want to have would the board want to approach the select board to maybe reserve space for the Springtown meeting to potentially bring something forward if everything was able to line up?
Let's play that out timeline wise, Rich. Like, would we need to have something?
In terms of the timeline, the warrant was closing on the 17th of February. You would have to
We'd have to
at least have something reserved. Doesn't mean you have to have it drafted, and you'd be talking about drafting and holding a hearing in March, April timeframe.
And so we have the ADU. We would have this. What else?
Electric
vehicle.
Plain bylaw, which is pretty straightforward, simple.
And we're already going into the contentious budgetary conversation, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. I say yeah, screw it. Let's try and go for it.
I don't think there's any harm in asking for a placeholder. But like we've done in the past, we have done this in the past, especially with the B1, is like if we get close and it just doesn't feel, we don't feel confident that we're going to have success on it, we will pull it and punt it till fall. And, you know, and that's what we do with B1. I think we delayed that whole thing like a year just because we're like, look, we're not ready. This is not going to fly. It's not good. And so we delayed it because we needed to do some more homework and research on it. So I think we move forward, but knowing that we may have to postpone it. But can't hurt to put a placeholder there and keep moving forward.
Okay. That's helpful. Thank you.
Now, so you're talking placeholder, we don't have to have draft language, do we?
No, I'm just asking for a placeholder.
All right. Thank you.
Or for planning purposes.
Yeah. Okay.
All right.
Thank you all for the feedback.
Yeah. Thank you both, Alexis and Jiwan. All right, so we just wrapped up that MAPC fiscal analysis. I guess we're gonna move into new business. Rich, do you have any? I guess we could just start at the top. Those look pretty simple and straightforward.
Sure.
I feel like we ought to knock out the quick things before we get into the zoning bylaw amendments.
Sure, we can. First item on the list, Mill River Heights, Ariana Lane. They've requested a reduction, actually not a reduction, sorry, release of their bond because the town accepted the roadways at the fall town meeting. I think that is acceptable. However, it'd be contingent upon getting the recording fees that we had for the registry of deeds, which is $578, maybe some change, somewhere in that order.
Okay. So like to, well, any discussion first on that? I don't see a concern. It's been approved. We just need to make sure that we return the funds minus what Zoe does. Okay. I'd like to entertain a motion to release the bond for Mill River Heights, Ariana Lane, minus the, or I guess what, making sure that the town of Norfolk gets compensated for the registry.
Correct. Yeah. It would not be part of the bond. They would just separately.
Yeah. So I guess it would be maybe the better way to put this is entertain a motion for the Mill River Heights Ariana Lane, release the bond after the town receives payment for the was it the deed filing?
Recording, yes.
Deed recording.
Moved.
Yep. Do I have a second?
Second.
All right, so it's been moved and seconded. We'll do a roll call vote. Gary Sullivan.
Aye.
Chris Montfort.
Aye.
And Chad Peck votes aye. Gary Searle, your opinion? All right, excellent. Thank you. Next, Rich.
Bristol Pond Estates, we had written to the developer asking for a report back by tonight's meeting in terms of moving the streets in Bristol Pond Estates forward for acceptance. We did not hear back from the developer. So my recommendation would be for the February meeting to put together a notice that would be sent to the developer by registered mail, which would include providing a copy to the town clerk, specifying where they don't comply with the rules and regulations, and send a letter to the bonding company that the town is going to, the planning board would vote to call the bond to complete the process. This is more just kind of an update for the board in a sense, not an action item tonight.
Yep.
I would review it with just with town council in terms of make sure we check all the legal boxes to make sure, but we did not hear back.
Yeah. What's still, Rich, just as a quick recap, what's still outstanding that needs to be done?
There is some, so the the street acceptance plan, as-built plans, the final plans need to be provided for the subdivision development, so we can eventually get to the point to make a recommendation. The board could sign off and those get recorded. There does need some, most likely probably some catch basin cleaning at this point. There are some landscaping questions that need to be addressed as well. Not significant issues in the scheme of things, but no less all necessary to complete this through the process.
Yeah. And roughly how much is the bond?
$40,000.
Okay.
We did also do an accounting of the, from looking at the records, the open space and recreation fee per lot, and I believe that they still owe $20,000.
Yeah.
So that's a separate matter. You can't come out of the bond,
Right.
but it is an outstanding item.
Yeah. Yep. I think we move forward, like you mentioned, towards next meeting. And we'll see what happens there.
If we can get things wrapped up, the goal would be to put this on for the fall town meeting. There won't be enough time to take care of all these items for the spring town meeting, but the fall of 25.
All right. I think the next item was the meeting minutes. I think probably just best to defer those to our next meeting when Melissa's back and Eric's back.
Okay. That makes sense.
Want to skip zoning and go down to, what is it?
Midway Branch?
Yeah.
Sure. After talking through with the engineers, what makes probably the most sense is that I will, on behalf of the town, apply through the Complete Streets program for the money for the construction of the sidewalk from Barnesville Road down to Tucker. If we're awarded the construction money, which is a grant, then we then go forward using the offsite mitigation to do the design for the sidewalk to then put that out to bid. So instead of doing that up front, we'll apply. If we get awarded the money, then we follow it up with the design and put the bid documents together to go out. So we can do that as part of the program. And just to recap, which I talked to, is that while we're looking at Medway Branch as a much larger shared use path, that doesn't, by going this route, going Complete Streets doesn't obligate us to do anything because it's a small, very tiny section of the entire path project that would happen long term. And I think I mentioned the last point, I think I mentioned this before, but perhaps I didn't. If we're successful in getting the grant award for the construction, we would then have to wait 4 fiscal years to reapply. So there's kind of a cooling off, if you will. If you do get money from the program, you have to wait to then reapply for other future projects. So in discussion with DPW, this did rise up to the level as being a project of high priority to consider moving this one forward. So.
Okay. What's the next one? The next item was the, I guess, planning board application fees.
Yes, Chris kind of alluded to this already. We did receive our budget memo from the finance director and the town administrator, and one of the requests was to for us, in terms of all the land use boards, look at the filing fees to see where they are in relation to surrounding communities. As you probably know, filing fees do come to the town through local receipts, so it is a revenue source for the town in terms of its budget. So we started to look at surrounding towns in terms of what those fees look like, and I think, Betsy, did you put something already in the?
I saw the current list.
I just put our current fees in there. I did not put the spreadsheet that I did today in there.
All right. So this is kind of more of an FYI, just to report back to the finance director and the town administrator that we'll look at that to see where we are in terms of fees with comparable communities. We were very fortunate today. It just literally came in. We need to take a look at it. But the town of Rentham last February hired the Collins Center to look at their fees across the board. So they looked at town clerk, treasurer department, weights and measures, all the land use boards, to do a comparison. So we have a really great tool for us to take a look at in terms of comparable. And then also it put together a methodology in terms of how to go construct fees as well. So we'll share that with you. We just need to go through a little bit, but this is more just an FYI. We're going to most likely be coming back to you. I know as you know, we never settle on a fee for sign permits. So essentially there's no fee at the moment. You'll be discussing ADUs next Monday night. They'll be most likely coming in. And so there's a few other items in terms of fees. So that's the overview of the fee agenda item.
Okay.
And then zoning, we go to easiest.
Yep.
To more involved. I'm going to say hard, but most involved.
Yep.
The easiest on top of the list is the floodplain. We just need to, we did get our letter from, which is in your shared drive, which came from, was it FEMA or DC? Yeah, it's FEMA, I think, right?
Yeah, it's FEMA.
FEMA. So the effective date was what? July 8th, I think. I'm looking at the floodplain bylaw they put in there. Let's see. So that's just a matter of July 8th. So strike through, which is July 6th, 2021 with July 8th, 2025. So that should be
that's pretty simple. I see it.
Yep, pretty simple one. Then, which Melissa kind of landed on earlier tonight, was the special permit criteria in the zoning bylaw to update it to to go from 1992 master plan to 2024 master plan. So it's a mere strike through 1992 and insert 2024. The other one that suggesting is a pretty easy, or should be relatively straightforward, is in criteria number 6. It says that a proper site plan is filed for approval with the planning board. So what I suggest is inserting the word when site plan review is triggered. There are some special permits that are under the ZBA, and even the planning board, that technically they're not subject to site plan review. So my suggestion is that we clarify that to say, if it's required.
Which file is that in, Rich? Or can you just share your screen?
I can share my screen.
Trying to find it.
If you see on this.
Oh, okay, I see it. So number 7, we changed from 1992 to 2024, and then number 6, I see when section 3 to site plan is triggered. Okay.
It's, I will say to you probably throughout the years that this has been on the books, it's technically ignored, so to speak. because it doesn't apply. So, for example, somebody comes for a special permit for an estate lot, there is no site plan requirement. The state lot in itself and the special permit is what's needed.
Okay.
That's one example. Somebody might be going for a special permit before the zoning board of appeals for a 1 or 2 family. Similarly, it's not subject to 611 site plan approval. So those are a few examples. So point is, I think it makes sense to tackle that at this town meeting. The one related to traffic congestion, again, doesn't necessarily apply in every instance, but I think that's something that requires a little more discussion. So I'm not thinking about that one at this point, just 6 and 7 for this town meeting.
Okay.
And then can stop sharing, and then we just go into my files here, into the share drive. Another one that's I think I'm going to share my screen again. Is the duration of a special permit. By Chapter 40A, special permit is good for up to 3 years. Right now, our bylaw says 1 year. As we've learned, 1 year is maybe a long period of time when it comes to doing projects in the past, but at the present time, 1 year goes by pretty fast.
It does.
And so the thought being to have it be 3 years would be consistent with state statute. It's not, and then the companion to this would be the estate lot, which is 2 years. Presently, to change that one from 2 to 3, so they would be consistent throughout the bylaw in terms of duration.
Makes sense.
Make sense?
Yep.
All right. Now we get into the EV charging station, which let me, I'll share that one too. Let me just. So Peter Diamond, which he's on. Oh, actually, I'm sorry. I did forget one more thing. Let me share it, and then you can. Does it show up? Actually, hold on. Sorry. So this was a suggestion that Courtney, who was the associate member of the zoning board of appeals, offered up last year, and it was an amendment to the non-conforming structure section to tighten up the language a little bit. This might be a little bit more, if you might want to digest this a little bit more, so maybe not, maybe it's a little too much for the spring. And I don't need an answer tonight. You can kind of noodle on it for next meeting. So I would just recommend take a look at it, see your thoughts. So now we'll go back to EV charging station. So as I mentioned, Peter took a look at the first version of the EV charging station and offered a bunch of good comments on that bylaw. So I made some potential revisions to it, which I'll share now based on his feedback. And his markup is in your share drive. So you could take a look at it. One thing I did not address in here that Peter did raise the question when we get to is about public hearing, to have one or not to have one. So just as we go through this, you can just think about it in context as we go through the bylaw, propose some of these changes. One option in terms of providing notice to abutters in terms of where EV charging stations are proposed. And this will be a situation where it's not a special permit, because there is, as we get to it, there is some locations that will be proposed by special permit. To do like what model what you're proposing under the ADU, which is it's a public meeting. There is notice. Notice gets sent to abutters, but it's not advertised in the Sun Chronicle. It's not abutters to abutters within 300 feet. And then it doesn't have the same lead time. So if somebody wanted to do an EV charging station and you wanted to still have the ability to have notice, you just give them notice at a public meeting, and that way you could be a little bit more responsive to in terms of applications.
So I want to put in an EV charger in my house. I need to let my neighbors know.
No, not for.
I was thinking the same thing, Chris.
It's not for residential, because the section that you were showing us was speaking about single family and residential neighborhoods.
Yeah. Let me open up the. You want to go to that section? I mean, I'd probably jump ahead. Maybe I shouldn't have. Let's go to the top.
Yeah. Okay.
I
had the same question, Chris. So yeah, let's I guess let's just go through it and see where that is.
We'll get down to when we get to the permitting section.
Yeah, okay.
Maybe I'm just thinking, I'm sorry, I'm ad-libbing a little bit. Peter, did you want to, maybe we do this in tandem? Did you want to maybe talk about your comments and then we can go to the sections that I have?
Through it there.
Yeah, huh?
I think you got a good plan to just walk through it section by section and.
Okay. All right, we'll go that.
Go through a section and see if the board has any comments or feedback.
Sure. Okay.
Yep.
So the first comment lands on section 1B here, which is a listing of the level 3 charger or greater. In terms of, so what we wanted to try to do is create some consistent language throughout. So Peter has suggested mixed use, municipal, or multifamily. And so what I try to do is just refine it a little bit and say any municipal or non-residential parking spaces. Excuse me, parking areas. To capture broadly those two different scenarios.
So with that, Rich, you're saying by saying non-residential parking areas, you cover everything but residential.
Correct.
That sounds
Yep.
good.
Yep.
And I did a lot of editing to cross out parking lots and use parking areas, use area as a language, because I believe that's a definition.
Agree. Yep.
Okay.
That was another change as well. that we put in there, per Peter's recommendation. As you see, I did add in towards the end is a rapid direct current DC for charging stations at the end of this B.
That is
That was
consistent with a level 3 charger is a rapid direct current charging stations. And the difference between level 1, level 2, and level 3 charging stations is level 1 and level 2 just provide power, electrical power to the car, and the charger is within the car. Level 3, rapid direct current charging station is actually a charger. So it's different in that sense.
And the board to the board, do you want me? I could scroll down to the definitions if that makes sense, and then come back to this.
Yeah, why don't we do that?
All right. So level 3. So actually, I think you see that. So 1 is a definition. Electric vehicle charging levels. Then electric vehicle. Those would be added. And then this also is proposing to change the building definition. I wonder if I should. And structure definition. So that way that the equipment associated with an EV charging station doesn't fall under a building. If that makes sense, because building is interrelated the way they currently are written.
Which was the definition for electric vehicle charging station?
Right here, sorry. I jumped ahead. My bad.
So I did add a little language to that it looks like Rich kept that an electrical vehicle charging station may be either networked or standalone. So the one that Chris might put at his house would be a standalone charging station, and something like a level 3 charging station that if you drive to Franklin and you go by the Adirondack Club, and on the left, you can see they're putting in some new level 3 charging stations there. And those will be networked. And by networked means you'll be able to go on an app and be able to locate those. And they'll be pay to use. And under the new Massachusetts Leads Act, the Massachusetts Division of Standards is going to oversee these type of vehicle chargers. And they'll do things such as testing to make sure that you're getting a gallon of gas for a gallon of gas, for example. When you charge your car, if you're paying $15 for a kilowatt, they're actually giving you a kilowatt of energy. So there's a lot of things to come down the pike with regard to these network vehicle chargers. And I think what would you try to do here with this zoning is to pretty much oversee that type of charger. And not the one that Chris wants to put on his house to charge his own electric car.
Correct. Well, let me go back to the top again.
Sure.
Not too far.
So with applicability in A, Level 1 and level 2 charging stations shall be allowed by right in any zoning district for single family, accessory dwellings and multifamily. And the key is designed to serve the occupants. That's an important part of that paragraph. It's the one Chris puts in his house is designed to serve him, not for someone to stop by his property and charge up their car for $10. And then B, Rich, you get into the level 3 or greater. And just for your information, there are greater charger stations. There is a level 4, very high level charging station they use on large trucks. We probably won't see in the town of Norfolk. But it's good that you have level 3 or greater. We never know what might come down the road.
Yes. I think
you cover it good there. And then the review process, you can get into that, Rich.
yeah. In terms of the review process, there was a couple of things that were in the previous version. One was about having an electrical permit in there. It really was you need electrical permit, so it really doesn't need to be reflected. The code already addresses it didn't need to be reflected in the zoning bylaw. So we took that out. And as Peter said earlier, the revision to this was with the level 1 and 2 charges designed to serve the occupants.
Yeah, on that note, Rich, I can see you left the electrical permit language in B and C. I don't think it's necessary.
Yep, I'll get that out of there. That should have been out too. Thank you.
Just out of curiosity, a good level 3 charger for residential use costs maybe about $40,000 with hardware and install. Do we not think that that's a possibility at all?
Those level 3 chargers, they take, so the ones planned and the ones we see going in take a 400 amp, 480 volt service just to power them. And the cost to put that service in would be too prohibitive. And I don't think the power company would allow that service to go into a residential setting.
Okay.
I think the biggest you'll see, and I have seen and inspected, is the highest level 2 is a 19.2 kilowatt unit. It requires a 100 amp branch circuit because it draws 80 amps to power a car.
Oh.
And the new Hummer uses that size of a charger, or the all-electric Hummer. So on the review process, Rich, in 2A, you added design to serve the occupants, and I think that was important because what we're saying there is the charger that person's putting in is solely for his own use. So I think that's key.
Yep.
And you can put more than one in, correct? Could have more than one car.
Yes, you can.
Yes. I would say we made stations plural, so that would yeah. Right, so I will take out the in B. To B, I'll delete the electrical permit, so that should come out.
With the energy codes, Rich, if someone's building a new house, they have to put in a branch circuit or a level 2 car charger according to the building code. So most of the new projects even the 40Bs, the garages, they have a receptacle in the garage that supports a level 2 charger. And when there isn't a garage, you can see an example of a pedestal installed at Hill Street. So the last phase of the units being built up there on Hill Street, those duplexes have vehicle pedestals at the sidewalk. So we in the building department, that was part of the requirements under the energy code. Well, that's a review process. It looks pretty good to me, Rich.
Design criteria is number 3.
Yeah, this is just more of the location of them.
And it looks like the changes that Peter proposed were mostly just some language updates from charging stations to parking spaces.
Yeah, so there's some minor edits to
Yeah.
like vehicle parking space.
Yep. All right. So then going down to permitting process number 4.
Going down to 4. Okay.
Yep. Permitting process. This is where, Rich, you were talking about the Y&O public hearing under 4E. So you're weird. Your document there has a 4A and then it goes 4-1. So your lettering, your bullet points changed.
Yeah.
Letters to numbers.
Okay.
But anyway.
I'll clean that up.
So 4A, you kind of change the language there for multifamily. This one multifamily and non-residential.
Yeah. Is that
now you don't specifically call out mixed use.
No, I
You call
changed
municipal.
Yeah.
And non-resident.
I call it, I use the term non-residential.
Right. So.
Because we have.
That's
in our bylaw, mixed use is mixing of commercial as well as mixing of residential and commercial.
Okay. Any other comments on that?
Number 5, we should add a simple majority vote by the planning board is required to approve electric vehicle charging stations. I know we are talking about the planning board in the previous sections, but I think
that's a good catch. So again, this kind of gets into the permitting process is more modeled after the ADU, where it would be a public meeting, not a public hearing process.
Okay.
And I'll change to planning board.
So then we get down to number 5, site plan existing parking lot.
Yeah, I do want to pull it just on 7 above, just so I have the use table, which I'll pull up, which is a companion to this for these changes. So level 3 or greater is by special permit in residential district.
Okay.
The rationale being that there is well, the schools might is one location, the residential district. Pond Street Recreation Complex is another one
Holmes's bus.
where we might get a combination of some locations or residential districts. But that's a special permit process.
Okay. Site plan was just some language cleanup.
Correct.
So, Rich, site plan 5A, adding electrical vehicle charging stations to existing non-residential use parking areas, for example, tonight's meeting on 262 Dedham Street.
Mm-hmm.
This would coincide with that, what you saw tonight, right?
Yes.
Yep.
And that would also work with the two that we were approached last fall, which one was at the Pondville Medical Center.
Yeah, those are level 3. So one that proposed that.
Oh, yeah, that's true. You're right. My bad. Yep. Yeah, those are level
So
one.
I've had electricians come to me at the building department for Pine Street Medical, and then across the street, right at the car wash, and also across from Linda's Variety at the Holmes complex. They want to put one in there too. It's to the train station.
Yes.
Proposed.
So in terms of if that's okay, I can jump to the use table.
Yep.
Change. Again, this is where so in terms of and just renaming them now to be consistent in terms of electric vehicle charging stations. Which is the terminology used today. So that's just in terms of how we identify it use type wise change. You see the first line is no to special permit from the planning board. You probably all remember that, as Peter mentioned, but the B1, they are allowed currently. That change was done when we did the B1 changes in 2021. I presumed the AG will approve it in the C6, which was added at the fall town meeting.
Right.
And then the rest of the districts, we just filled it in.
So when I read this, you've got the charging station level 1 and 2, but then above it, you just have charging station. Should that be level 3 or higher? Is that what that's for?
It is, yeah. Well,
Yeah.
actually, probably could, yeah. So I could amend that to level 3 or greater.
Yeah, I would, because I'm just confused when I read it. I'm like, wait a second.
Yeah.
Residential. I look at residential, for example. I'm like, well, level 1 or 2 is a yes, but then it just says charging station in general is special permit. So I think that,
Yeah.
it would be a little more specific and say level 3 or higher.
Yep. No, that totally makes sense. I'll make
And
that
then I would move that line. I would switch the 2 rows. So 1 and 2 is first.
Yeah.
And then 3 or higher second.
Gotcha. Yep. I'll do that. I'll flip them as well. Okay. That makes sense.
Makes sense to me. Yep. Okay.
Makes sense. Makes sense. Others?
Anybody, I mean, Peter, thank you for going through all that. I appreciate it. I know you have a vested interest in it. So, but I appreciate you putting in the work.
You're welcome.
What? He also is a technical expert on the topic. So
Right. That's right.
whether he has an interest or not, vested
Wow.
interest.
Yep.
Either way,
Can
we
you
greatly
do
appreciate
the
it.
the structure definition?
Oh,
Structure.
sorry.
Yeah. Let's look at that. So we did talk about, Rich, you want to put that back on the screen?
I will.
I don't
Yep.
think we did the structure one.
Yeah, let me I'll open it up again. Sorry. Let me see where we're at here.
There's half of it. Just scroll down a little.
Yeah, let me it's gonna change the zoom a little bit so we can I don't think that did enough. Did it do enough? I think it did, right?
Yeah, it's there.
Okay. So this our definition of building and structure came up more recently with the ground mounted solar that for Camger coatings. The because that was in the way our bylaw is written, the those arrays became structures. So then they were subject to the additional setback. So they had to apply for a variance to get those because it was a setback from a structure to a residential district. So that was one thing that's popped up, giving consideration to the definition. And then again, the pedestal for the EV charging stations, they'll be in close proximity to the street. They're going to be in front yard more likely than not. So it doesn't make sense for them to fall under a building definition. That all makes sense why this change.
Rich, if I may interject here.
Absolutely.
Okay, go ahead.
Is the part about the mechanical equipment, and I struck that out, I believe in my.
Did?
I think I struck that out in my note.
Did I miss that?
I talked about that. And so mechanical equipment could be an AC condenser, for example. Or
Yeah, Rich, he did strike it out on his.
And I don't think that a piece of equipment like that, which is mechanical equipment, should be included in the definition of a structure.
Okay, let me, thank you. I will take that out of there. What I'm,
And I was just looking for a reason why it might have landed in there. Was there a concern of some mechanical equipment, or where might have that come from?
I'm gonna say at the moment,
I don't know.
I think that might have, I don't know. But
Yeah, discuss that with Bob, because he didn't think
yeah,
that was something that should be in the definition of structure. That's all. The rest of it.
yeah, I'm sure he'll agree that that should be out of there.
Okay, so that, I think that wraps up all the pieces for the electrical vehicle charging.
Yeah. And what I'll do is I'll speak to Bob tomorrow, if not the day after, and then send him all these decisions, not decisions, sorry, proposed amendments, have him go through it, and then report back to the board on the meeting on the February 11th to make sure we captured everything and he agrees with the proposed changes, and then I can report back
Okay.
at the February meeting.
And then we'd be looking at doing, when
And
are we
then
doing
you would
the
just be,
hearings for these?
then it would just be on the warrant, then forward to the warrant, then hold a future public hearing on it.
Okay. So are we thinking of doing the public hearings for everything we've talked about up to now, like in March then?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. And and I would say, once you've done all that analysis, we get, well, some of them you've already got it ready. We get them sent over to advisory as soon as they're ready for review.
Yeah. So Justin asked me to go to the advisory board next Wednesday evening.
Okay.
It was more so related to ADU.
Yeah.
But at that meeting, I'm going to give them a heads up on all the other articles as well coming forward.
Okay.
Just
All right.
All right.
Then the moment we're all waiting for. We got the ADU, which we have a public hearing next week on.
Oh, I thought you were going to say a motion to adjourn. I'm sorry. But
Yeah, no, we could do that too. I'm ready. We can do that too, but
I thought that was the moment you were talking about, but
no. You saved the best for last with the ADUs.
yeah. Well, all right, yeah. So
But
ADUs is
but we're in the
not much to say. The public hearing next Monday night.
right. There you go. So that's good. Anything else? What are any other updates, Rich?
I can't think of any at the moment.
Okay. We've got our the big thing is we got our public hearing, our special kind of out of sequence public hearing, which is next Monday, and that's Zoom only. Is that right, Rich?
No, it's both.
It's both. Okay. All right. So it's both. So that's great. And then we kind of get back to somewhat of a normal cadence after that. And so February will be, just to reiterate, February will be kind of wrapping up these bylaw amendments. And then March have the public hearing for the rest of them. And then we'll just have to work in some advisory meetings, probably starting in February through March.
Yeah, they
Probably
probably
in
will.
April.
Yeah, I would say later March because the warrant doesn't close to the 17th of February. So I think, you know,
Yeah, okay. So probably March, April. Okay.
yeah.
For advisory. And then town meetings in May. All right.
Yes.
All right. Anything else? All right.
No,
Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All right. All's in favor?
Aye.
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 All right.
Good night,
Have a good
everybody.
evening. Good night.
Thank you.
Yep.
Bye.
Bye.